Thank you so much for joining another virtual bird talk with Chirp Nature Centers. So for those of you who have just joined us, or whether you're joining us again, welcome. Go ahead and post in the chat where you're coming from. And just to let you know, this is Chirp's third year of holding educational wild bird related events. We run them May through October. So we look forward to seeing you, hopefully as many as you can attend. And all virtual events can be re-enjoyed on our YouTube channel. So we're going to upload them after we have the talk live, so you can enjoy them from anywhere, anytime. Now, let me go through a few birdhouse rules before we begin. We love to hear from you throughout this presentation. So go ahead, post in the chat, keep your questions coming for our specialist. She's happy to answer them in real time. And if we don't get to them, we're going to have a question and answer session at the end. And if we still don't get to your questions, we're going to go back through and we'll filter through them at the end of the presentation and respond to you on our social media platforms. So be sure to keep the chats coming, the comments. Like I said, it's so much more fun to have a presentation when it's very interactive. Also, don't forget to pay attention, because at the end of this presentation, I'm going to fill you in on how you can take a quick quiz and be entered in to win a free bat-themed prize. But more information on that in a little bit. So let's go ahead and get started today. I'm Tori Wayner. I'm your host, and I'm so excited to introduce you to our bat specialist for today. Her name is Linda Stamer, and she started as a wildlife biologist. Her love for nature led her to become a wildlife biologist for the San Bernardino National Forest in 1996. And then in 2014, she began to work for the Southern California Mountains Foundation, and currently she is their partnership director. And as part of her roles, she manages 2 different volunteer-based programs: off-highway vehicle education and forest restoration. And here's a photo of her planting trees during a restoration project following the El Dorado fire this past spring. She says that her job keeps her committed to preserving and sharing the beauty of our national forest with others, and she loves it. And when she's not planting trees, in her spare time, she's a mom of 3, and you can find her mountain biking and hiking and enjoying nature with her family in Big Bear Lake. So I'm so excited to introduce you. Linda, go ahead and turn on your camera and wave hi to all of the people joining us today.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
Good. Thank you for having me, Tori.
You're so good. It's always such a pleasure to get to work with you. And so as I was setting up this presentation, a question that kept coming back into my mind was the question for you of why bats? Like, you obviously have such a passion for nature and biology. What led you to kind of focus in on this very specific mammal?
Well, bats kind of fell into my lap. When I was coming out of college, there was several studies that were available as an internship. And one of them was working with one of the most world-renowned bat experts, Pat Brown. So I took one of her classes at Desert Zizek Center through local Cal State, and ended up doing a lot of surveys right here locally on the forest. So it just kind of fell into my lap, but I do feel like they're the underdog of the mammal world. A lot of people don't care for them, or they're misunderstood, and so it kind of makes me more intrigued.
Yeah, well, it is equally intriguing across the board. So go ahead and share your presentation. We're really excited to jump in today.
Okay. Let's see, here we go.
Perfect. There you go. There we are.
Took a minute. Well, as I was saying to you guys, studying bats has been a passion of mine, but it is just one part of our whole ecosystem locally here in the mountains. There are about 1,400 different kinds of bats in the world. They make up a quarter of all mammals, so they're really significant amount of species of bats compared to other mammals. And honestly, they are really well misunderstood. They are actually closer related to humans than they are to rodents in as far as animal classification. They're highly intelligent, and their skeletal structure is very similar to humans rather than rodents, which they're often mistook for. A lot of people think they look like flying mice, and they kind of do. And we'll get into that. So this is a red bat, and I like to show this picture because it's a good example of how they got their classification as a mammal. So they're named into a group called Chiroptera, which literally means hand wing. So if you took your skeleton and stretched out your finger bones into an actual wing, that would be a hand wing. And that's exactly what their skeleton looks like. So they are, again, very highly intelligent and have a very similar skeletal structure to humans. Bats, like humans, have only one pup per year. So that is kind of a slow fecundity rate compared to like smaller mammals like rodents that can have like 3 or 4 clutches per year. They typically have one pup per year. So that's really slow in reproduction. So that makes them a little more vulnerable as a species. So here's a bat babysitting other bats. They're very social animals. So they will be found in colonies or clusters or groups quite often. Many of them will actually leave their young behind with someone kind of watching the roost. So again, highly intelligent, and they'll look after each other, even other species at times. So other species of bats.
Will different species, will different species stay together, or are they pretty specific on like which species?
No, we have found maternity roosts with many different kinds of bats in it. So different pregnant bats or different bats with young, different species. So they can live communally, which is, again, kind of unusual for a lot of animal species. So typically a bat has one per year, but like humans, occasionally they can have twins or triplets. Red bats are kind of more known to have twins. And I know it looks odd, it looks like they're upside down, but as you probably already know, bats do hang upside down. And it's for a couple different reasons. Mostly it's to avoid predation. So they don't want to get eaten by other animals. And a lot of other animals can't hang upside down. And so it kind of hides them. And plus, unlike birds, they can't run into flight or jump into flight because they have underdeveloped leg muscles. So they don't have running legs. So it's easier for them to hang on and then drop right into flight. And they have special talons and tendons to have them just, whenever they can hang upside down and they relax, it tightens their talons. So they don't have to worry about letting go. They could sleep upside down. In fact, they could even die upside down and be hanging there for months, which is kind of cool. So bats learn to fly in about 4 to 5 weeks. And that is quite a feat. If you think about a slower reproducing animal, slower developing animal, like humans, we take a year to walk, and they're flying in 4 to 5 weeks. That's pretty awesome. And they have to quickly, if they're in a cave with several other hundreds of bats, they have to figure out how to fly and really well, or they're going to crash into other bats, fall to the ground, and predators will be waiting. So predators of bats typically are snakes, foxes, owls, typically more nocturnal animals. So your daytime hawks aren't as big of predation, but towards twilight, you will see, like when bats are coming out. I know bats aren't birds, and we are a bird store here, but bats are often mistook for swallows because they come out around the same time. Like there's a lot of feeding over the Big Bear Lake with swallows at night or near dusk, and bats will be coming out around the same time, feeding almost the same behavior and around the same time. So people are always asking me, is that a bat or a bird? So they're often mistook. But owls are a big predator of bats. Even your spotted owl here in the local mountains, we have found bat bones in their scat many times. So they gotta look out for their predators as soon as they learn to fly. This is a typical bat we have here in Big Bear. So I mentioned there's 1,400 different kinds of bats in the world. The United States, or North America, really has about 45 different kinds of bats. So of the 45 different bats in our country, California has 25 different bats. So we have over half the bats in California of diversity. So that's kind of cool. And even cooler is Big Bear has 20 of those found in California. We have 20 of the 25. So we are the most, or one of the most diverse places to study bats. So I do feel lucky that I landed here learning about bats. This is a Yuma Bat, and it's probably one of the most common bats found over the lake. So when you see bats flying over your head in the lake, they do like big open spaces, meadows, lakes, streams to hunt. They'll be eating insects and they'll be flying kind of zigzag pattern all over the lake. Okay, so that looked like a big bat, but when you have this bat in your hand, it's really tiny. So most of our bats are really small size and they're insect eating bats. So they're eating insects, not people. And again, this is a good picture for size comparison, but you never want to handle wildlife. They do carry diseases. As we have heard over this past year, 2020, the coronavirus, bats can carry up to 100 different strains of coronavirus. They can carry rabies, they can carry other diseases. Fortunately, most bats don't. Just like humans, most bats do not carry disease. And most of them don't have rabies, but you never want to handle wildlife just in case.
So admire them from a distance is what you're saying.
Exactly. and know that they do a great service for humans by eating all those insects so that insects aren't eating us. And to be honest, insects carry more diseases than bats and most wildlife, especially our mosquitoes, which is a main dietary source for the Yuma Bat. This is a good slide to show comparison of the largest bat we have in the United States versus the smallest bat. The smallest bat we have in the US is the Western Pipistrel, the little blonde bat on the left. And then the larger bat is the Western Mastiff Bat. And you can see they have so many different shapes and sizes of bats. One, like the Mastiff Bat has huge ears and a tail. And then some bats don't appear to have a tail. So, and we'll talk a little bit about more why in just a minute. But worldwide, the smallest bat is the Bumblebee Bat of Thailand. So the Bumblebee Bat can fit on probably about your thumbnail. It's a tiny bat. And then the largest bat are the fruit bats, as this picture shows. This picture was taken in Asia, but fruit bats or flying foxes, as some of them are called, they kind of do look like a flying fox. They can have up to a 6-foot wingspan. So incredible to see and terrifying if you don't know that they eat fruit. So they're not going to eat you. They're actually terrified of people. They eat fruit. So I think it's cool. I got to see these in India myself, flying over your head, coming out when they come out at dusk, and just like they do here in the US. But it does look like Batman flying over your head, like with the little cute cropped pants and everything. So I really feel like the whole Batman comic series got its start from actual bats because they look like a little man flying. Actually, not quite so little. Some of them are quite large. So again, they come in many shapes and sizes. This is a Jamaican fruit bat. You'll notice it has really big eyes, and they actually have small ears too. So bats have different ways of hunting. Some have big eyes, some have big noses, some have big ears, and that'll tell you exactly how it's hunting. And as a wildlife biologist, you're a detective to figure out what they're eating. And you can do that by just looking at facial characteristics. This guy has a bunch of fruit packed in his cheeks. And the cool thing is he will eat the fruit and then fly over the rainforest and drop the seeds out either through his mouth or the other end and refertilize the rainforest. So they do a great service to humans. Whoa. Again, this is the Mastiff Bat, the largest in the US. And you'll notice it has really small eyes, but very large ears. One of the major myths of bats is blind as a bat, or bats are blind. If you notice, their eyes are pretty small, but so are ours. We still have predator eyes, but they're not very, very big compared to our whole head. So bats can see just as well as us, but they do use other mechanisms for navigating. And they don't rely on their eyes as much as we do. So they use their ears, as this one here, obviously is a great navigator with his ears. And we'll talk about how they do that in a minute. Again, this is the hoary bat, smaller eyes and large ears. So not only is he navigating with his ears, but he's hunting with his ears as well. So he's hunting insects. So he's got to be able to hear them and navigate to find them and catch them midair, which is pretty cool. The hoary bat is actually also the only native mammal to Hawaii, but found in Big Bear, they can migrate all the way to Hawaii. So they're migrators when things get cold.
Wow.
Kind of sounds like my future retirement too.
That sounds pretty ideal.
This is the joker of the bat family. I know he looks ridiculous to us, but he's probably looking pretty hot to some of the other bats because this guy, let me tell you, he can hear well. The spotted bat obviously is hunting insects with his ears. If you notice, he has a giant thing in the middle of his ear. Humans have them too, a flap of skin called a tragus. And the tragus actually is found pronounced in a lot of insect-eating bats because it helps them filter sound and echoes. So that's how these bats are navigating through echoes. And we'll talk about that.
I do believe you said your dog kind of looks like this bat. Maybe?
Yes, sadly, our dog looks a lot like the spotted bat. Yeah, poor Steve.
Does he hear you well when you call him? Will he respond well?
Oh, he hears.
Okay.
Does he listen? No, that's another thing we're working on.
Yeah, okay.
So this is the ghost-faced bat, and the ghost-faced bat is pretty cool too. Also found in Big Bear. They have an oval-shaped or almost round head, like a satellite dish. So, and again, that's how they filter sound, kind of like an owl. Their ears are slightly offset so they can triangulate noises. And his whole head is like a disc, just filtering in sound. But to us, it doesn't look like he has a face, which is called the ghost face.
So size-wise, these pictures are awesome and very detailed, but you'd mentioned the bats are maybe like, they're pretty small, right?
Yep. Their bodies are typically like maybe 6 inches long at max.
Wow.
For most of the bats in the valley here. This one's a little larger, and we don't get this one too often in Big Bear, but we get them right down the hill into the desert valley, into the Sonoran Desert. And this is a leaf-nosed bat. So again, you're looking at this bat as a detective. How is it hunting? It's got smaller ears, big eyes, and a large nose flap. So obviously he's hunting with his nose, and he's using his eyes to navigate rather than his ears. And the nose helps hone him into its prey, which is pollen. So this one's a pollen eater. Okay, so we're talking a lot about hunting, and I'm talking about echoes and whatnot. And if you haven't heard, there's only a few animals that can echolocate. Bats are one of them. Bats are highly intelligent, but they use that clicking sound. They have high pitched frequencies. Most of them are above the human hearing. We're about 20 megahertz or to kilohertz. And then bats are usually like quite higher. There's a few overlaps, like the Mastiff Bat you can hear sometimes making a high-pitched squeaking sound at night. But typically you can't hear most bats. But they will send out this high-pitched frequency noise. It bounces off their prey or like trees or buildings to help them navigate. And then they process that noise with their specialized ears. And then figure out how fast and far they need to fly to get where they're going or eat their prey. So echolocation is what that's called. And humans, we use bat detectors to be able to hear the bats. So we can tell by different frequencies and patterns of clicks which species is which. It's kind of cool. It's a pretty honed in science at this point. We set computer monitors out overnight and we can collect, all 20 different species in certain places of the valley.
Wow.
So here's a guy demonstrating how efficient the whole echolocation process is. This is a big brown bat. They're known for larger teeth. So when we were studying them and catching them with our hands, we had to wear thick leather gloves because they would bite the heck out of us. But here he is. He's coming in on a moth. And he's grabbing that moth. If you notice, he's got a large tail membrane. The Europatagium tail membrane is good for insect flyers because it helps them with aerodynamics. And if they miss their mouth with the moth, they can scoop it up with their tail. So it's kind of an extra safety net. Very acrobatic animals. Like if I was running along and you threw a hamburger at me, there's no way I would catch it, much less catch it with my mouth and try to eat it and keep running. There's no way. So they're pretty incredible animals. And bats can eat up to 1,000 mosquitoes or small moths in an hour. So if you think about the service they do to us, we would just be buried in insects without animals such as bats and swallows that are eating so many insects for us. And the Western pipistrel is also a really cool one. They can eat larger insects such as grasshoppers, cicadas. If you notice, it's got the large ears, so he's hunting with his ears using echolocation, and also that tail membrane, so he's clearly catching insects on the fly. They can also eat scorpions, which is really incredible. Like they seem to be immune to the scorpion sting, which I know I'm not, unfortunately.
So there is a question about
Sure.
all the insects. Someone in the chat asked, is that why they're always over my pool? They, I'm assuming, being the bats.
Absolutely. So they do fly over bodies of water quite frequently to get the mosquitoes larvae and all the little gnats flying off your pool. And there's another myth about bats, bats getting stuck in your hair. And bats are not going after your hair. They want nothing to do with humans. But a lot of times you'll be walking on a summer night and you'll have a cloud of insects following you, like coming off the top of your head, following your heat. And so bats will hone in on that and fly down and try to eat the insects following you. But there's a whole thing about bats getting stuck in your hair. And I think that's where that comes from. Occasionally, they probably have gotten stuck in people's hair. Unfortunate. And even though I have studied bats for years, I wouldn't want that either. It's a little disarming. But bats do a great service for agriculture. If you think about all the moths they eat, the moths are eating our crops and food. So if we can encourage more farmers to put out bat habitat around their crops, they might be able to use less pesticides. So if one bat can eat 1,000 mosquitoes in an hour, think about what thousands of bats could eat. Just absolutely tons of insects. And again, like we talked about, other bats eat other things, not just insects. So the small-eared, this one has no tail, and it's a pollen-eating bat or nectar-eating bat. And he'll stick his whole head into the flower. And he's honing in on that flower. This is a saguaro. Sticks his whole body in to drink the nectar. He gets pollen all over his head while he's doing that. And then when he flies to the next one, he carries the pollen with him and pollinates the next flower. So, and he doesn't need the tail membrane because his prey isn't running away from him. He has big eyes and smaller ears because he doesn't need to echolocate to find the moths or mosquitoes. Plants aren't moving. So he could use his nose membrane to, find, smell the flowers. But they still do echolocate when they go back to their roost into a dark cave. They will still echolocate to navigate sometimes. But they're not blind. They can see. So again, these are the majestic saguaros that they are the main pollinator for. And this bat happens to be federally protected right now. So it is on the serious decline. And I think about what a loss it would be if we lost this species. It could take out the whole saguaro ecosystem. So something that's a huge icon for the West and habitat to many different animals. Also the agave, which humans have a particular liking for when it comes to margaritas. So you can thank your bats for that. They do pollinate agave. So this is a Mexican long-tongued bat. Again, they're nectar feeding, so they don't need large ears or the cool tail membrane. So I also mentioned like the fruit bats of rainforests and how they help regenerate. This is a slash and burn rainforest, which is happening all over South America. And bats really can help regenerate it by eating the fruits and the seeds and then flying over these open areas. And they literally poop out the seeds into fertilizer and help regenerate the forest. Fruit bats are found in Africa, South America, Asia, and Australia. So they're the large fruit bats. They're found pretty much all over the world except for Antarctica, and we don't have a lot of the large ones in North America. We have the nectar feeding. But they do help pollinate banana trees, guava. Here's one eating the guava, and they typically don't eat the fruit that's processed by farmers. They eat the more really soft decaying fruit. So they're not really taking away from their crops either. That you notice the big eye and the small ears. So he's not needing to echolocate a lot. This one is using its eyes. These are some of the products that bats help us with. Everything like pollinating from avocado to gum trees, allspice, cloves, the bombacacia tree that we used to make life preservers from, and rope. So you have like your tequila, you have all kinds of different products there that they help by pollinating the tree. So another thing that they eat, there are fish-eating bats in Asia. Got to see some in India. They're incredible. They do echolocate to find their little fish, and they dive in and catch the fish and eat them. Also frog-eating bats, they work the same way, found in Asia. And then this is probably the most infamous bat we have, and this is the living Dracula, the one of everyone's fears, the vampire bat. And it does look creepy. These things are really cool. They will land on the ground and they can walk on their back legs like some kind of freaky thing, but they're this small. That's a chicken's foot. They're really small. They prefer to like go in and they'll take like a bite out of a chicken's leg, like not a bite actually, but make a small incision, and they'll lap their blood, and they leave before the animal even knows it. They don't drain an animal. They can't do that. They're literally too small. And they don't want to kill their prey. If you think about it, if you can, keep coming back on a nightly basis to get a little more feeding. Occasionally, they have been known to take blood from humans, but it's pretty rare.
Is that their only source of food, is blood?
They do only eat blood. It's pretty incredible. But again, they do have a really good purpose for humans. They have found in their saliva, they have an anticoagulant that has helped heart patient medication. So kind of interesting. Even vampire bats have a good use for humans. We talked about what they're eating, where they're living. They live under bridges. They live in caves. This is a famous cave, the Bracken Cave in Texas, 20,000 bats. Like they look like barnacles all over the cave walls. Pretty incredible to see. The Western Mastiff Bat and Big Bear likes the rocky outcrops like in Holcomb Valley around the dam. So they like rocky outcrops. This is the silver bat. It looks like a skunk, I know, but it lives in the cracks of bark and trees. We've seen some around the Discovery Center. Again, old cabins and under bridges. Big brown bat loves those little cracks. Congress Bridge in Texas is probably one of the most famous bridges, designed with like the crack structure in it for bats. And it's home to almost 1 million bats. And they come out at night. And if you've ever seen the mosquitoes in Texas, they do us a very big service.
Wow.
A lot of bats will hibernate during the winter. Some of them hibernate by themselves, and they could lower their body temperature to 20 degrees. And they could go without food or water for up to 6 months. The problem with that is they're vulnerable. If they wake up out of a deep hibernation, they could use up their stored energy and die. So you never want to disturb a sleeping bat, especially during the wintertime, because it really could kill them or a whole colony. Like if you go in and see a bunch of hibernating bats, leave them be. So because you don't want to wake them up. They do tend to hibernate in clusters, not just for warmth, but for the social aspect. So again, try not to disturb sleeping bats. They are vulnerable. Some bats, like I said, the hoary bat, he doesn't like to hibernate. He just migrates. I like his plan. The yellow bat also will just fly down to warmer climate. So he'll come up here and feed during the summer and then goes down to Palm Springs, lives in the palm trees, and feeds down there during the winter.
Also sounds like a good plan.
I think so too. I know I'm running out of time here, but I'm getting to the end. A lot of people have bats in their houses in Big Bear or in their attics or like roof eaves. Don't panic, but if you can try not to get rid of them or exclude them until like mid-July, that's about when their maternity roosts break up. The coolest thing about bats is they mate in the fall, and then they can just hold off gestation, hold off the whole fertilization project until they wake up in the spring. So wouldn't that be cool? Like if you're in college and I'm gonna get pregnant, but I'm gonna hold off on fertilization until I graduate. Like that is so cool if they can do that.
What?
So yeah, then they'll actually get pregnant in May and then have their babies actually, I'm sorry, they get pregnant usually in April and then have their babies in May or June. So by about mid-July, the maternity colonies are broken up and the bats are on their own. So
that's incredible. I had no idea. Also, time-wise, you're doing great. You have like 10-15 minutes. So no
okay.
rush.
Okay. Well, there are other things you can do too. When the colony flies out, you can go in and get some caulking or screen and cover up the holes in your place. But typically, if you call like an exterminator, they will bring in poison and probably kill a whole colony. And like I said, they have a very slow recovery rate. It takes a year for them to have a baby. And so if you're killing a whole colony, it takes a long time to recover. Right now in our country, bats are really on the decline. We have the white nose syndrome going around. It's actually reached California, in Northern California, but it's killing thousands of bats. It's a fungus, and because they're social, kind of like us, they don't know how to social distance. So they're spreading this fungus and it's killing them in their roost, which is really sad. But what we can do is help them with their habitat, more bats, less pesticides. Pesticides are directly killing them by poisoning their food source. And we're taking their habitat for our homes as well by cutting down on the trees. So we can put up bat boxes, and I think Chirp does have some for sale.
We do.
So that's an important thing you can do. And go online to figure out how to hang it properly too, because they do like south facing the warmth. They really like the warmth in a bat box. One other fun thing I like to share about bats that they do help us with is their guano. In large roosts, that brown stuff that looks disgusting to us is one of the most fantastic fertilizers on the market and probably the most expensive on the market. So yes, if you think your job stinks, these poor women in Asia, I think this is the Philippines, they're mining bat guano. But I'm telling you, I've used it in the Forest Service greenhouse. It's fantastic.
Have you harvested bat guano? Is that you?
No, I haven't. We don't have large colonies here, and our bats are so small that it would take like years to collect enough to, put on your tomato plant. But the stuff in like other countries from the larger bats, they have larger poops. So it's, yeah.
Makes sense.
It's all about poop in the biology world. Poop and reproduction. But honestly, less than 0.05 bats in the world have rabies. So there are other animals that actually have a higher risk of rabies. A lot of times your local health department think it's a lot higher. They think it's up to 10% of bats because the bats they're brought that are injured or sick are the ones that are dying of rabies. So typically, if you have a bat on the ground, you don't want to mess with them because they probably are injured or sick. But most of the time, you don't ever see them unless they're flying over your head. So again, you should never handle bats. But it's really important to share that with others, the importance of bats in our ecosystem. They are such special animals, and they do us a huge ecological service by all the insects that they eat.
Which great
So,
question from Melissa, if I can
yeah,
ask real quick. Melissa asked, how can I attract them to my home, and do they coexist with songbirds?
they do coexist with songbirds. Bat shelters are one of the best things you can do. This one is a giant one that was put up by the lake years ago. But you can put small bat boxes on your house. If you have cats or dogs, you want to put them at like a good, 10 feet or more up. We have put them pretty like 15 feet up into trees, south facing. And around the Discovery Center, we had almost every bat box be occupied at one point. Like we went around and surveyed at night and they were all being used. So bat shelters or bat boxes are a great way to attract them to your home. And I have actually heard that if you get bat guano and kind of rub it on the inside, it attracts them even more. I've never bothered with that. I've had pretty good luck with bat boxes. But they do like trees too. So if you have a really open lot, I probably wouldn't bother putting a bat box up. Just put your water out for the birds, and bats will come to water too because of the insects that it draws in.
And there's a follow-up question to that.
Yep.
Beth asked, should bat boxes be placed in trees? Also, we have owls and lots of hawks. Do they exist well with each other?
Well, no, not really, but yes. So they are found together in the forest, definitely. So first question, yes, I do put them in trees all around the Discovery Center and higher up on buildings, and we put them even on poles. Yes, they are eaten by hawks and owls, so that is a problem, but they naturally coexist in the forest with them. I was giving a bat talk years ago at the Discovery Center, and I was telling the group that owls are one of their main predators. Literally, an owl came out of the trees and ate a bat over our head. So it does happen. It's unfortunate, but it's part of the cycle there. So I would say go for it. Err on the side of going for it. Some things that the Forest Service has been doing, closing old abandoned mines for public health and safety, but we're closing them in a way that leaves them bat friendly. So we put these gates on them so bats can fly in and out, but people cannot get in. Especially we prioritize like the most unsafe mines that people should not be entering for their own safety. And also we've learned which ones are important to maternity colonies or hibernation roosts. And those are the ones we prioritize to close first. So you might see some of these odd bars or structures across some of the mines that you come across. This is a huge one they put up in Tennessee for a large endangered bat colony. We don't have them this big, but they look very similar on a smaller scale. But honestly, if I could leave you with one message, please spread the word that bats are beneficial. Especially this last year, they got a really bad rap of, people eating bat soup. People still do eat bats worldwide. They are, a delicacy in some countries. But honestly, you probably don't get a lot of meat from it. And they're such slow recovering animals that it's a hard loss for the ecology. So that's kind of what I want to leave you with. But I'm hoping I covered most of the main topics. If you guys have questions, I'd love to help answer.
We do. We actually have them pouring in. So
Great.
Are we good to start answering some questions? All right. So here's our first one. Silent Wings asked, are there any bats in Big Bear that you could hear the chirp with the human ear if you're close enough to it?
Yes. So the Mastiff Bat, and one of the best places is the lake shore or on the lake if you have a boat or access. Around twilight up to like 9 p.m., I hear them flying over my house in the East Valley too. You can hear a loud, like constant, like chirp, chirp. it's almost like a radio frequency. It's like very methodical. But around 9 p.m., there are no birds that do that. It is the Mastiff Bat, and it's around 20 kilohertz. So it's within our hearing range.
Wow.
Good
And then
question.
thank you for that answer. And thank you for the question. And has any progress been made towards curing the white nose disease you'd mentioned earlier?
There has been actually. They're finding a lot of different treatments. Most of it is being done back east. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has had a huge part in that, as well as Bat Conservation International, BCI. They do a lot of the research, and to be honest, I haven't kept up on like the cures of what they're using, but I've heard everything from even like a banana peel at one point, antifungal, trying to find organic antifungal methods to treat the bats. But they are finding, they're moving along, and they've been trying really to quarantine and stop the spread more than even the cure in the beginning. So they're a little bit behind with the cure, but it's coming along.
And does it only affect bat populations?
It does. It's a good question. Yep. And caves, and they believe people caving and cave exploring was one of the causes of its spread, because the fungal spores will get into the soil and then get onto your shoes, and the cavers will carry it from cave to cave and then spread it, and then the bats, spread it as well. So it's kind of a bummer.
How long has it been an issue?
Over a decade. It was first discovered, I believe it's been about 20 years now. But it just recently, I think in 2019, it was found in Washington, and just the past year or two was found in Northern California. So it's been mostly back east, but it's been devastating to their populations.
Yeah, and Anita asked, does the West Nile virus affect them?
No, oddly, and that's one of the services they actually provide, is they eat so many mosquitoes, but they don't appear to get sick from them. So that is a kind of a cool thing.
That's very cool. Another question we have for you from Samantha. She said, do all bats have the same number of babies?
Typically, yes. So kind of like humans, we pretty much have one baby per year. But occasionally there's the twins or triplets. So those are the outliers or the anomalies.
Alrighty, let's see. Keep going. We have a few more minutes to do the question and answer. So if you guys have any more questions for Linda, please post them in the chat. I'm going to ask one of mine that I think is pretty interesting. So you had talked about the way that some of the different tails are, I'm going to see how scientifically I can say this, but the membrane is sometimes connected to the back of the tail and sometimes it's not. And did you address that? I was still kind of curious. That just seems so unique to me.
So if you think about like the rudder on like a plane or a boat, like for steering mechanisms, so the tail is often used for that. So sometimes the free tail actually helps them fly in some situation, like the Mexican free-tailed bat is also found in Big Bear. Oddly enough, we didn't know it until my kid was in kindergarten, and we found one in Mrs. Savage's at Baldwin Lane's classroom. So that was interesting. That was the first known Mexican free-tailed bat in Big Bear. And then after our sound equipment started developing, we started hearing them more often too. But the Mexican free-tail does have that tail that's free, more like a rodent, like a mouse or a rat. But it does help them steer like a rudder. And then the ones with the Europetagium, or that tail membrane, actually just really helps them float back and forth, and really aerodynamic bats have the tail membrane. So I don't know if that answered your question.
That totally did. Thank you.
Okay.
And Beth asked, are bats monogamous?
No, they are not. And they don't have, the females don't have a lot of use for the males. They will mate in the fall and that's it. And the males have nothing to do with child rearing or anything. It's kind of interesting. So they will mate, males go their separate way. So often we find like males more solo in bats, in caves or roosts, whereas the females go into a maternity colony, just like we have our babies in a maternity ward in a hospital. All the moms get together and have our babies. Bats do the same, but they'll raise theirs together communally. So I don't know if they'll stick around like the same roost, but bats are known for coming back to the same place year after year.
Wow. So average size, what would be an average size of like a maternity colony?
Well, locally, we have found like maybe up to 40, 50 bats. Sometimes we've had like 2 cases over 100. And we didn't like make sure all of them were pregnant females. We actually set up our traps, caught a couple, found that they were pregnant, and then pulled out. We didn't want to disturb them. It is invasive. Like we have nets that we catch the bats in, and they'll get stuck in the net. We'll pluck them out, and we have our headlamps on. So you have this giant plucking, you have a net staring at you, and we'll measure and then let them go. Sometimes we actually give them a little snack too before we let them go because they're kind of under stress. But yeah.
All right, we have another question. Oh, do they use echolocation to hunt and to navigate?
They do.
So for both purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Because they never seem to fly against something. Like it sounds like they never end up running into anything. So is that their main source of being able to see, especially if they're flying at night or when it's hard to see like dusk time?
Very good question. So bats, when they're flying low in the canopy of a forest, they will echolocate more often. And then when they go up higher to like migrate, they will echolocate less often, less frequent. So they have just an occasional, which is the Mastiff Bat. You'll hear him occasionally going beep, beep, beep over the forest. But when he has honing in on an insect, you'll hear the feeding buzz where it's like beep, 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 beep. Like he'll increase the frequency of his calls. So he gets more echoes and more accurate location. The danger of that is when humans will all of a sudden throw up a skyscraper, and through the skyscraper, all of a sudden, like a bat's flying high enough, doesn't think it needs to be echolocating, and then it will hit some of the taller buildings and die. Like birds have done the same. So it's unfortunate.
I hadn't even thought of that. That was a great question. Thank you for that. Beth asks, how long do bats live on average?
Very good question. So I think the record for a bat in captivity was 40 years. Typically, they live 20 years or less. But again, it's a really long time for a small mammal to live, like rodents, 3 to 5 years. And they have like many clutches of, babies in that time. But bats, they have a slower reproduction rate and a longer lifespan. And honestly, I think a good part of it is they spend like half their life asleep. So if we slept more, we might live longer too. It's hard to say.
It's good. Yeah, my mom tells me that all the time. Do I listen? Yeah.
I know. So I think teenagers are kind of like bats, where they like to stay up all night and sleep all day.
Yeah, like bats. If only we could echolocate,
Right. Actually, some people have started learning, like some blind people have started learning echolocation techniques and started making clicking sounds and listening to the sound reverberation.
Wow. So for our new bat fans out there, can you kind of break down the science behind echolocation? Like what exactly is it that they're doing?
Okay, so bats will actually emit this high frequency pitched noise through their mouth or their nose. So they can do both, different species. So they're sending out the sound waves, it's bouncing off something, and then they're processing it they have, again, like highly developed ears and very smart brains too. They're basically doing physics on the fly, where they're like, okay, that sound wave came in, and so I know that the sound echo came back to me at this rate. So I know there's a tree ahead at 30 meters. They can hear things up to 100 meters away, but as they're, again, they'll increase the frequency as they hear something bounce, and they'll keep increasing that frequency so they don't hit it, or so they do catch it. So probably didn't do a great way of explaining that, but it's based on sound waves and hearing the echoes and processing the echoes.
Oh, I thought that was great. That was really cool. And then Julie asked, she said, I missed it. Are bats the only mammals with wings?
So very good question. Bats are the only animal or mammals that can fly. The only mammals that can fly. So on that note, there are flying squirrels. Flying squirrels aren't true flyers. They do not have flappable wings. They actually glide. So we call that volplaning rather than flying, where they glide from tree to tree. And then they'll hit the ground and they can't just jump and fly. They have to go up the tree again and then glide back down. So they are the only true flying mammals. Good question.
We have another question. Oh, do bats have feet?
They do have feet.
But you'd mentioned they can't run with them, correct?
Correct. They don't have strongly developed legs. Some of them do have longer legs than others. They do have actual feet and toenail claws. Those toenail claws are pretty integral. They will climb up trees. Like if they fall down, they will climb up a tree like a squirrel and then glide down or jump into flight, like drop into flight, because they're not very good jumpers or runners. So they will let go from they have like really strong feet muscles, talons and tendons that they cling to a branch with, or like the cracks of a bridge or a building, and then drop right into flight if a predator comes in.
Wow, fascinating. All right, so we have time for maybe 2 or 3 more questions. So if any of you have questions, be sure to post them in the comment section. And I was thinking about this. Do bats make nests? So for some birds, they have like cavity nesters, right? Where they'll intentionally make a hole in a tree and be able to nest in there. Do bats make any of that?
No, they do not. They typically find the cracks and crevices behind bark, like a tree that's kind of losing its bark. Perfect place for a bat to squeeze in cracks. Or like if you have like a crack in between your roof and your eaves, they love that. Behind your chimney of like the old structures in Big Bear, they love that. They will find cracks and crevices to kind of hide in, cracks in rocks. They're kind of crack dwellers.
I like that term. Very cool. Well, it looks like all of our questions were answered. So I want to say thank you so much for joining us, Linda. And before everyone leaves, I do have a little information on how you can win a very special bat themed prize. So don't go anywhere. But I did want to thank you, Linda, before you sign off, just for educating us today on such a unique mammal that's obviously so important to our planet.
It was my pleasure. I hope you guys learned something, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead and post a chat. Did you learn something? What's something new that you guys learned today? Or maybe a new bat you learned about? I know I would post so many things. All right. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. All right. So for all of you new bat fans out there, thank you for joining this event. And it is your turn to test your bat brain. You can go to chirperbirds.com/quiz, take a quick 2-minute quiz, and be entered into win a mini bat tower. And the exciting thing about this grand prize is we're going to mail it straight to you, and then you can put it up in your tree, in your backyard, wherever you see fit. And as a thank you from Chirp Nature Center, just for joining us today, all of those who take the quiz will receive a free one-of-a-kind Enjoy the Backyard Bird Show sticker. And so the stickers at Chirp, they're made by us. You can't get them anywhere else, and we will happily give them to you just as a thank you for hanging out with us today. Don't forget, however, there is a timeline. You only have 24 hours to complete this quiz. So right after we sign off, make sure you go to chirpforbirds.com, take that quiz, and then go on with your wonderful weekend. And don't forget, we have virtual and in-person events happening all the time. So please join us in one of our upcoming events. We really look forward to meeting you. So our in-person walks, we have the next one coming up. They're the first Saturday of every month. So we have August 7th. We're going to meet at the Chirp location, our new nest, which is 578 Bonanza Trail in Big Bear Lake, California. We then have our virtual bird walk where you can join us from wherever you'd like to. And that's going to be on August 11th. Now, our next upcoming bird talk, this is really exciting. We have a rad Raptors bird talk with Stan Tequila. And so Stan Tequila has actually published hundreds of birding guides and birding books. He's attended radio shows. He's done a lot of work and taken some fantastic pictures all around the world. And he's going to be with us, joining us at 10 a.m. on August 21st. It's a talk I promise you will not want to miss. I'm really looking forward to it. So until we see you again, let us know how we can help. We're located at our new nest, 578 Bonanza Trail in Big Bear Lake, California. You can also email us anytime at help@chirpforbirds.com or check out our website, chirpforbirds.com. Also, you should definitely follow or subscribe to our social media channels. We're posting and sharing wild bird themed content every day for you to enjoy, no matter where you are. So that being said, I just want to thank you again for joining us today. I had so much fun. I hope you did as well. I really look forward to seeing you at a next in-person or virtual event. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Happy birding.